Hi, hello, welcome to my review of this new Godzilla movie, Godzilla Minus One. This is the newest Godzilla movie directed by Takashi Yamazaki, and honestly, I didn't know the guy really, except for one movie that he did, which is, I think, a Netflix original animated film called Dragon Quest: Your Story. I don't know if this movie is based on a game. It seems like it's based on a game, but honestly, this movie I just kind of forgot about. It's not a great film. It's just a film that I watched like I think 5 years ago maybe. But he's not the reason why I watched this movie. It's obviously Godzilla Minus One is the new big thing that people were talking about. It came out in I think December of last year and it was huge. Like people were hyping this up so much. It instantly was very well rated. I remember this instantly popping up on the Letterboxd 250. It still is in the IMDb top 250 movies of all time. I also remember a few people putting this on their year-end list of best movies of the year. So Critical, I think, had this on his number one spot of the year. Chris Stockman on number three, Jeremy Jans on number two. Like, this movie seemed to be something special. And like, I was just wondering why, because it's a Godzilla film. I mean, yes, I know where this came from. I know what the origins of Godzilla were, but you can't really make me very much excited for Godzilla. I did watch the original Godzilla from I think the 50s or the 40s, and obviously that's a movie from Japan, and it's kind of their way to deal with the trauma that they had in the Second World War. So it has some historical context as well, and it's a good film. I also watched the original Godzilla in this current series of Godzilla movies, which is the 2014 Godzilla, which featured Bryan Cranston as the main character, I think, and I thought it was fine. Godzilla King of Monsters was also fine, and I did watch the Shin Godzilla movie, which was directed by Hideaki Anno, and I think that's my favorite Godzilla movie. I try to understand why people were hyping this up so much. And basically, the reason seems to be that this is a movie that takes place in Japan after World War II, and it's about characters dealing with World War II and also dealing with Godzilla. So it's basically just like the original Godzilla movie tried to deal with the trauma of the World War. This movie also tries to do that, but actually still takes place during World War, and it seems like after everything that's happened with the things that happened in Japan at the end of World War II, Godzilla is just another thing that people have to deal with, kind of. That's definitely an interesting turn, an interesting side of a Godzilla film that I have not seen yet, and it seems like it's the major thing that people are really excited about in this film. And I definitely thought that was the best part of the movie as well. It's kind of weird to describe, but I just think the look and feel that this film gave me in some sequences that had to do with just the people in this film gave me Top Gun Maverick vibes, even though it's like such a different type of movie. And I really like the view that they took on like the World War II, where it's literally containing people who are kind of critical about the war, who, you know, like the main character who doesn't want to be a kamikaze pilot. It's kind of interesting. It's an interesting thing to definitely. But that's really about everything that I really enjoyed about this film. I honestly don't think the action sequences in this film, the Godzilla sequences in general, are that great. First of all, it really caught me off guard. I do think it's kind of an interesting thing to not build up as much of like the mystery of Godzilla, because in the first sequence of the movie, it's relatively quick that we see Godzilla do his shit, and it's an interesting different thing that I haven't seen yet, but I can't say it worked. Like honestly, I think a little bit more build up, a little bit more mystery of what this guy is could have been a bit better. I feel like the first sequence of this film instantly just kind of took everything away from like the mystery, or in general just the way that Godzilla is actually very frightening. I think it kind of took away from that a little bit, because when we see Godzilla, he doesn't really look frightening. Just looks kind of goofy, and he has very human proportions as well. Also, in general, the CGI isn't the best. I can't say that this is something that the movie does worse than, for example, the 2018 Shin Godzilla film. But I feel like everything else about that film was great enough so that I could kind of overlook the fact that Godzilla itself doesn't look amazing. And to come back to this beginning that I said that didn't really have a great build up, it kind of feels like a parody. You might know what I mean, but I feel like I've seen that cliche a lot of times already, where it's like you have a movie, and in this movie people are also watching a movie, a horror film or whatever, and they just kind of show like a very cliched version of a horror film where it's just showing the main characters and without any build up they just show the monster and they kill them, and it's like, oh, this is a very spooky horror movie, but in reality it's not. Very bad explanation probably of what I'm trying to say, but it exactly feels like that, where we have these characters and we could have made a very creepy build up for this Godzilla creature, a fucking creature that is absolutely horrifying actually if you see it in real life, but it's absolutely not frightening at all because it has no mystery or build up or anything. Actually, the first time we see Godzilla, someone instantly says, "That's Godzilla." I mean, I guess. I feel like these characters just take this thing way more for granted than they would have. Like, if you actually saw a fucking Godzilla creature in real life, you would be way more freaked out, I think, if you compare it to the way the people in this movie do. One thing that I do think is really interesting about this film that is not really comparable to any other film has to do with the fact that this takes place in, I don't know, maybe 1945, 46. And it's the fact that they try to kill Godzilla with very weird techniques, and it kind of makes sense. The way they try to kill Godzilla in this film is by sinking him onto the ground of the ocean and then letting him back up again, which, like, honestly, it doesn't seem like this would be a realistic way of killing him. But it also kind of works because this is 1945, and I don't know how the scientific research standard of that time has been. But if you watch any Godzilla movie now, people would just be shooting at him and it would be like not working, obviously, because it's Godzilla. But it's still like, I don't think I've ever seen a very interesting way of people killing Godzilla. And it just seems like this way of making the story take place so much earlier in history is a good excuse to actually find an interesting new technique of killing Godzilla, which is cool. But in general, this movie could be best compared to Shin Godzilla because it obviously is a newer version of Godzilla that is from Japan. It is also kind of trying to be a little bit critical about the own country in the movie itself. It's not just trying to be a fun Godzilla movie that is about Godzilla trying to destroy a city. But I just feel like Shin Godzilla is much better. It's implementing all these weird scenes with humor, and it's also just trying to be so much more realistic, I feel like, but in a kind of ridiculous way. And every time we get a Godzilla sequence, it hits you so hard because it's really, really unexpected, it feels like. I think these sequences in Shin Godzilla just have so much more impact. And with this Godzilla movie, I think the Godzilla sequences were just fine. And I found myself just wanting to get back to the humans every single time we see a Godzilla destruction sequence. I also wanted to mention the fact that this movie is kind of predictable. I know that Godzilla is not really the most interesting or most inventive plot ever, but I just genuinely think that every other Godzilla that I've seen has a little bit more, I don't know, surprises maybe. And to be honest, at a certain point in this film, I just felt like I could predict every single plot beat that would appear in this film, especially towards the final fight against Godzilla. And the finale of the film was genuinely not as interesting because, first of all, I could predict everything that was happening, and second of all, I again didn't really think that the Godzilla sequences were as impactful and as great to look at. And so I just thought the finale of the film wasn't as interesting at all, except for one little detail that they kind of revealed in the end, which I really liked, which I didn't see coming, only to add another thing in the end that I really didn't enjoy again. So I don't want to say it canceled itself out, but if you try to think about a rating, you take in consideration both of these things. And I mean, I'm not the biggest Godzilla Minus One fan, it seems like. But one thing I do want to add to the fact that I just said the movie doesn't look that great is the fact that this movie was only produced for about $10 million. How the fuck? I genuinely don't know how. I don't want to say that this movie looks great, or that I was really invested in the visual effects in this film, but considering the fact that this is $10 million and that a movie like this year, for example, Indiana Jones or the Mission Impossible movie or Fast X were $300 million, that's sad. That's really sad and definitely an achievement. And so I give this movie a 5.5 out of 10. I don't quite get the hype about this film, but if you did, good for you, definitely. I definitely watch this with a person who liked this movie much more than me, so it might just not be for me. I don't know. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.